Probably the best known law on the use of private data to date, for laymen at least, is GDPR. Like almost everyone has heard of it since its enforcement last year, exactly 1 year ago. Everyone started to be panicky. Everyone who had a business, like an online store or no matter how small of a business, everyone was like, oh my God, we need to implement GDPR. Are we implementing it correctly? And so on. What happened before this was that businesses, and I know this because I was also a consultant for a lot of them when they were setting up, especially in my e-commerce work, when they were setting up shop, they were like, okay, so let's collect this data and this data. And I was like, but you only need this to send an invoice. Why do you need to ask them this and this also? Like, I don't know, do you plan to do something with it? Like maybe ask them about their favorite color so you can personalize the newsletter somehow? Oh no, but maybe we'll need it later. Like ask them their mother's maiden name while you're at it. I was like, but you know, it's not cool, but whatever. There was no law forbidding it, so they did it just because you never know when you might need it. And right now, as I will go into details over, the state authorities, which are not regulated as businesses started to be, the state authorities are currently in a similar Wild West phase in which, hey, let's just gather all data now and we'll see later what for. Because as users became more aware of the dangers which can be derived from the misuse of their private data, and hey, who are we handing this over to and what are they going to do with it, and data breaches and everything, the state authorities had the means to impose to businesses a regulation framework. But for the state authorities, no one actually thought about this because they just thought, oh, it's normal, you know, like I have my birth certificate and my personal ID issued by the state. Of course, the state is supposed to know everything about me. I am their citizen after all, and I need this personal identification when I travel. But now, with the emergence of new technologies like biometrics, which can collect new forms of data about you, which no one previously had access to, now there's this little battle between the state authorities and citizens over what can be collected and what for and why. This is an unprecedented situation, so various countries have various ways of responding to it. We will go over the most vocal debates and crises which are currently ongoing, and see what this is about. So, basically, while we're okay apparently as the general public to use biometrics, even though it's hugely unsafe, as my colleague has previously shown, we're okay to use this for like cutesy stuff. Oh, I can log into my phone scanning my iris, how cool, let's try this. Or, oh, I can just use my fingerprint, or I can go into my favorite bar and they will scan my face and recognize me and bring me my favorite drink. Cool, let's do that. Sure, I will sign any agreement. So apparently users are not very concerned for their security and privacy when it's about applications which seem user positive, but they are very, very concerned in some states. I will get to that soon. In some, they are not. They are very concerned about the state having access to this data. There are lots of protests which are explicitly using dystopian metaphors, especially with the facial recognition software, which is like the most heated thing users are upset about, citizens are upset about. And they I don't know, they tend to go there. It's probably also a cultural thing, because our imagination regarding future developments has been in part shaped by dystopias, but each time something happens, like a major data breach or evidence that the state did something to infringe the privacy of its users, the public flares up and jumps to a dystopian metaphor to protest it. Like after the Snowden leaks, the entire program of NSA to listen to American citizens was dubbed Skynet, like the evil AI from the Terminator movies. And people were, protesting against Skynet. And when again the UK tried to implement and managed to, in the end, their CCTV program of taking video footage of people passing through major traffic points daily. The protests which were held then were with a logo featuring the Eye of Sauron. And again, the protests were addressing like, stop watching us, Sauron. That was the message. So yeah, people are jumping to associate any kind of surveillance from the state with a fear of dystopia and of the state misusing it. I am far from criticizing this. I do feel that we should be surveyed as little as possible because of data breaches and not only. But still, I think it's interesting. And I will also compare it to the way other countries are positioning themselves towards this soon. So apparently, besides facial recognition software, users are now so wary of any kind of surveillance, especially in their private life, that they are rejecting even the cool projects which seemed to be made for them. The latest very public case which got a lot of media coverage was that Sidewalk Labs, in partnership with Google, was supposed to design a smart city neighborhood in Toronto with I don't know, everything optimized for the comfort of users and everything looking very cool, and smart homes and smart bus stations and whatnot. And people just flipped and rejected it because they thought this was mass surveillance and they didn't like it. And they're even suing the municipal authorities now because, hey, why did you guys approve this in the first place? So yeah, I can see the people becoming more and more uncomfortable with surveillance. Yes? Wait. Okay.
Would you blame, in the first place, movies? I mean, most of them created kind of a bad notion if you're to surveillance.
Yeah, actually, I'm very glad you asked this because one of my future research projects, which isn't yet very, it's still in a raw stage, but which I will be developing with my colleague Andrei Brad from Code for Romania. We will be presenting something precisely about the influence of movies into the public's attitude towards mass surveillance at the Virus Bulletin Conference in London in this October. So yes, this is something that greatly interests me, but I wouldn't blame movies per se because I think it has more to do with the notions which people have in the West, in Western states, about citizenship rights, like it's my right to a private life. What movies do, and it isn't necessarily good, is that they create false impressions of how technology works. You know, the Hollywood hacker, which can, touch your phone and suddenly it goes boom. That kind of stuff. People are overestimating, like if you see it in police shows, how, I don't know, someone makes a little sketch and the police are scanning it, maybe even with their phones, and like in 2 seconds they have the suspect. It doesn't work like that.
I don't know if it's a Western thing. I mean,
I'll get to that
spying
soon.
started in Europe, or Asia, or something like that.
I would say it's a Western thing because other peoples, and really I'm planning to go on to get to that soon, other peoples like in Asia or in the Middle East, even though similar mass surveillance programs have been implemented, they are not that bothered by it. I mean, Western peoples, that means Europeans and Americans and Canadians and, you know, culturally Western, that's what I mean. I mean, Australia counts as Western too, even though they're not geographically Western. Western peoples are very quick to jump and say, oh my God, dystopia, while some peoples in Asia are living in something I would personally clearly label as dystopia, and they don't seem to be bothered by it. So.
Mainly the non-communist, non-ex-communist countries, you mean?
I'm sorry,
Yes.
Can you wait for the questions at the end, or do you have anything really short and succinct to say?
Okay, moving on. So, biometrics initially started theoretically as the need for greater security, as my colleague has also shown. As passwords were routinely compromised and people couldn't be bothered to set complicated passwords, and the human brain is not made to store that many random strings of characters and, you know, all that jazz. Multi-factor authentication, especially biometric data, was considered by some a solution to all of this. Like, hey, let's switch at least partially to biometric data, which cannot be faked, right? And maybe we will strengthen security overall. Of course, like all new techs, flaws were immediately found, as my colleague has shown extensively. And the most famous case, which like really proved to state authorities in your face that this is not secure, was when a dude named Jan Chrysler, in hacker circles known as Starbug, he hacked the German defense minister's fingerprints 4 years ago using only commercial software and using only a photo released by her own PR cabinet, like a press release public photo, and another photo which he had taken himself at a public meeting of the minister with, I don't know, members of fans or whatever, but the photo was taken 4 meters away. So it didn't even take something out of the ordinary for him to replicate her fingerprints, so he could use them, I don't know, in considering that she was the defense minister, I guess this can lead to quite the security breach. So, as I said, facial recognition software is under a lot of attention and pressure right now by the public, unlike all other biometrics. Also because it's something which can be collected more easily, more subtly. It's not like, I mean, if a state decides to just record faces of everyone who passes through a certain point, it breeds more discomfort for the public because they just know that beyond their control, they might have been already recorded 100 times and there might be extensive records of them without them knowing, unlike something which requires direct interaction, which at least would make them aware that a biometric is being taken. Like if the police stop and fingerprint you, at least you know about it. But when it's facial recognition software, you feel that you lack even the most basic control over it. So here's like a little overview of countries in which the state authorities are using it and how the public reacts to it. In the USA, there is heavy opposition. The San Francisco ban, which happened just a few days ago or last week, It's the first of its kind. Apparently, it sets a legal precedent, and Oakland is apparently soon to follow. They just banned all municipal authorities from using facial recognition software in CCTV cameras or anywhere. They don't want the police to have access to this data, and they won. New York banned only landlords from using it, so a business entity, not a public authority, but still it was a small win, and again it shows that a lot of citizens don't like it. Don't like the idea of their landlords knowing exactly at what hour they come home and with whom and how often does this person visit you. And you know, I mean, it's almost the granny landlord from Romania reloaded. It is estimated that in 2016, 50% of the population were already, from the US population were already in the databases of facial recognition data owned by police. And probably the number is even higher now. This is something which protesters are insisting upon, and a major point which makes them upset. And also there's all the scientific reports and casual citizen reports of facial recognition software which is being biased. As my colleague mentioned, you know, since it's a machine learning mechanism, algorithm, it's only as good or as smart or as accurate as the data you feed into it. And since it's made by white people, it has trouble discerning Asian people. And since it's made mostly by white dudes and being fed images of white dudes, it has trouble apparently recognizing women, and especially people of color. So if you are unlucky enough to be a woman of color, so to belong to both categories on which the software is biased, you will get stopped at the airport almost every time in the US, and like not believed that you are you, and subjected to, you know, the whole let's search your pockets and let's search your hair, especially if you have afro hair, and make sure you don't have anything dangerous in it. So this is for a lot of citizens annoying and demeaning, when they could just, you know, do it like the old days and show their passport. Like, what was wrong with showing your passport instead of being singled out for your race and gender, you know? Yeah, especially at airport checkups, the implementation of facial recognition software was met with backlash, but also in the police records taken without consent, like just from CCTV cameras on the street or at supermarket entrances and so on. That's how it currently is in the USA. In the UK, objectively speaking, the situation is a bit worse, namely because their CCTV system was already way more widespread than it is in the US. And now they paired it with the facial recognition software, and basically there's nowhere to hide from it. Because of the huge public backlash, the funny thing is that the UK are still in debates and reluctant to pass a law which regulates the use of facial recognition software by police or by state authorities of any kind. So it's exactly a Wild West situation. No laws yet, but although there are no laws yet, police do use it. They do stop people on the street and ask them to, you know, hold still so I can take a photo or run you through my facial recognition software program. And just a couple of days ago, there was this case when a dude refused. He covered his face when he passed a camera or some police officers, and they fined him, although there's not even a law that would allow them to use the software in the first place. So it wasn't like he was breaking any official rule. A lot of protests, a lot of dystopian metaphors. Again, as I said, oh my God, we're living in an Orwellian state. Of course, they would choose Orwell over Sauron, I guess, because it's a more British thing to do. uh, and according to independent testers and NGOs, the facial recognition software in the UK, the version of it which was trained by police records and the version they are using right now, it only works correctly in 4% of the cases, which is incredibly, incredibly little. There are reports that just like the police authorities and the NSA in US did when they first trained their facial recognition software, they scraped photos from Google of private people without consent, photos even taken that track the person through, I don't know, the last 10 years of their life. Thank you, Facebook. Let's all take a moment to thank Facebook for this. So yeah, incredibly invasive, but the police in UK is desperate enough to even feed celebrity photos and all sorts of irrelevant stuff into the algorithm. So maybe that's what led to the 4% accuracy rate, which is, yeah, it would be funny if it wasn't sad. This is an older mural by Banksy decrying the state of UK being a CCTV nation. Also used by protesters nowadays with a correction that we're an Orwellian nation now, one nation under the supreme ruler or something like that, which is like the main commander and villain of the Orwell 1984 book. In China, there's a huge international scandal about the surveillance of the Uyghur minority. The Uyghurs are living towards Tibet, and they are Muslim, so very different from the Han Chinese, which are the dominant minority. And apparently they're very terrorized and picked up over anything, and the police are tracking their every move through cameras, through facial recognition software, they have to, I don't know, if they want to speak to journalists, they have to make up some other pretext and then drive far into the desert, leaving all phones behind so they can have a normal conversation. Some of them are arrested just because they made some reference on chat to their religion, like mention, hey, so what are we cooking for the holidays? And they're being picked up and detained, especially the men. So this is quite the humanitarian scandal. And apparently some people say that this is among the chief reasons of the US-China tech divorce. It goes beyond Huawei. The US is saying that the Chinese is basically stealing tech like they did with facial recognition software in order to weaponize it and turn it into a militaristic app to use against their own population. And apparently that's why they want to cut ties with China and not allow them any kind of technological sharing. The ban, which is very much in the news today with Huawei, is only the beginning of the story. The ban extends to any kind of scientific collaboration between the two peoples and so on. Of course, I think there are still commercial interests at play beyond this concern for humanitarian crises, but still they have a point. In other countries, in Germany, they implemented facial recognition software just a little bit, like through one train station in Berlin. They have more than one, and they just implemented it in the South train station. And they only used volunteers, which they paid for, their willingness to participate in the program. and still led to public outrage. I guess with a history like Germany, people are even more sensitive to any kind of potential of the state to become totalitarian. In the United Arab Emirates, as I said, moving on to Middle East, it's implemented on a wide scale, and not just for law enforcement, but also for citizen positive applications, like client authentication upon entering a business. The thing I said with enter a bar, your favorite drink comes up without having to ask for it. And also for border control and that kind of stuff, there is no public backlash. Everyone is okay with it. No one is protesting. Of course, you could say that the right to protest is a bit more freely exercised in the West, like maybe they can't protest. But, you know, when the people are uncomfortable with something, word gets out through journalists, through, you know, like the situation with the Uyghurs in China. Here in the United Arab Emirates, there is no sign of dissent over this. In Japan, the forms of facial recognition software are truly closer to our idea of dystopias. Let me detail that for you. It's not just law enforcement. It's like if the facial recognition software at work thinks that your face looks kind of sleepy, you get a blast of cold air to the face. If you work with people, you have a profession that involves servicing the public in any way, there's a sensor which will start beeping and alert both you and your supervisor that your face is not smiling enough. You are not meeting your smiling quota. This is, I think I selected these two examples because they're the ones I find personally most outrageous. But there are also a lot others which would seem to a Western citizen as being hugely privacy infringing. Like, I don't know, if you loiter on the street, if you stay like to admire something and you're near a camera, the camera will ask you, can I help you? Or please don't loiter, move along. If the cameras catch you, I don't know, throwing garbage in a garbage can but missing it, they will scold you. Which again, maybe it's a nice citizenship application, but I think it can breed huge resentment on the long term and overall paints the same dystopic picture as I've said. No significant backlash, again, just like in the UAE. In Singapore, it's less than in Japan. I mean, no policing at work, at least. But there are facial recognition software on lamp posts, sort of like the CCTV system in the UK. It includes also some citizen positive applications, like if they see an elderly person who is lost, it's easier to track, I don't know, your mom or your grandma who is missing from home. You can just tap into the system as a private citizen and help find them. So I guess there are also some nice things in the Singapore implementation of facial recognition software, but again, no significant public backlash. That's why I'm starting to believe that it's also a Western thing about, you know, rights to privacy and the way we project this idea of dystopia. What about the businesses which are supplying the tech to state authorities? So state authorities are able to do this whole facial recognition software. Well, for the major companies which are Google, Microsoft, and Amazon, both employees and activists protested the idea that these businesses might sell the software to law enforcement. They saw the potential for dystopia right away, even when the software was still in a developing stage. Google agreed very fast not to sell it to authorities when the public made this demand first, but they also warned that, in their opinion, it can't be stalled, and they were right. Microsoft, no, I don't know what happened to that photo, whatever. Microsoft agreed. I mean, they did not sell it, but they did not make any promises for the future either, or a firm commitment to defending privacy values. And Amazon did not agree and sold the tech to law enforcement. And now they are facing huge public backlash. First, they were facing just protests from their employees that looked like this, with Jeff Bezos's, the leader of Amazon's, face printed out and held in front of the cameras. And now they are also facing, like just this week, a huge investor backlash. Investors are saying that they're going to stop working with them if they continue to supply law enforcement with facial recognition software, and probably Jeff Bezos is going to be a bit more inclined to listen if it's about investors. The resistance to facial recognition software is also technical. There are some people who are having fun, even if they don't think they can seriously block the software, but some of them are just taking a shot at it while the software is still imperfect. So privacy advocacy groups and some art groups, they tested out some ways to confuse the software and to prevent your face from being identified and tied to your identity. So these are the ways which were identified currently. There are some psychedelic classes. I did not include all the photos of this, but they're easy to find online if you want. Like not your regular sunglasses, but like with other shapes coming out of them or colors. Apparently it's enough to confuse facial recognition software. There's also a digital print scarf, which you just wear on your neck. And to the human eye, it looks like some scarf with some abstract shapes, but for the facial recognition software, it looks like tiny little faces. So it doesn't know where your actual face is. So they can't read it. It can't read it. And there's also an anti-surveillance coat, which looks like a 90s disco jacket. It's very, very shiny and silvery, and also it reflects some light in a way which makes the cameras not able to see you passing by. But it only works for CCTV implemented facial recognition software, and it doesn't work if the police really, pull you over and scan your face with their tablets or phones. There is also, this one is really interesting, a baseball cap with tiny laser dots of light, infrared light, which they project in some points on your face, similar to the points which the facial recognition software uses to measure out the proportions between your features. And again, the human eye cannot see that your cap projects some weird lights on your face, but the facial recognition software won't be able to pick it up properly. I mean, unlike the scarf, it will see a face, but it won't be your face, something like that. And also there's the anti-face makeup by an artistic and digital rights advocacy group called Cihodariu. But as you can tell, it's a bit impractical, and I guess it would take a long time for people to dress up like this before leaving home every day in order to avoid the software. So it's just for the sake of protest. So basically the takeaway from all of this is that there's also going to be a huge need in the following period to develop facial recognition software and make it more accurate. And there's going to be a huge need to develop ways to resist it. And I'm sure that whatever laws get adopted, they will not look the same in every country and every area of the world. So there will still be a huge place for variety, for the better or the worse of it. That's it. Does anyone have questions? Or am I just the last thing standing between you and pizza?
There's one more thing. Questions?
The presentation title was Low Debates. Where's the debate?
This is the debate between advocacy groups which are resisting the use of the state, and the state which is saying to people that it's for your own security. And I just wanted to highlight the way in which major countries are okay or not okay, and to what degree are they okay with the software being used on a large scale. That was the debate. I didn't mean that I would be hosting a debate here, but sure, we can debate if you want.
No, because the presentation was somehow single-sided. That face recognition is bad, and that's it.
I didn't say it's bad. It does have its applications. Of course, the state is right when they say that they have managed to catch some criminals because of it faster. Of course. But like in any totalitarian regime, okay, so I'm jumping to the dystopia metaphor, not necessarily what I have in mind, but I think that in the West, and this is precisely what makes some citizens, most citizens, so upset about this, one of the fundamental tenets of our political system is that the personal freedom trumps the security of many. So we cannot sacrifice individual freedoms for the sake of collective security. And that's exactly what the protesters are trying to say, so that's why. What?
Just sorry. Yeah. Actually, what Rousseau defines by social contract and a community is that the interest of the many trumps the interest of one.
Oh, yes, but our current form of political organization, which is for better or for worse democracy.
It's a republic, so.
Yeah, okay.
It's the majority.
Well, even so, the majority needs to vote on it, and the majority doesn't seem to like it very much right now.
We'll see.
We'll see, of course. And of course, I assumed that all of you are familiar with the positive uses of facial recognition software. There are also, besides finding lost and confused elders, there are also finding lost pets and all sorts of nice apps which are developed with facial recognition software and which carry positive social value. So of course we have all that, but the question and the debate it comes down to, like any other thing, is consent. So I guess it will be up to, not up to every person, okay, fair enough, but up to every country as a whole to negotiate this among themselves.
What do you think is the role of the mass media in the way a group of people backlashes, or there are no backlashes on these kind of topics?
That's a very interesting question, because while I think that mass media is responsible to keep us informed, like independent journalism, which is not influenced by state, I wouldn't like the state to tell a journalist that, hey, you can't talk to people about that if it's something which is true. But at the same time, in the age of advertising and clickbaity media, all media should be held more responsible, especially when they do fear-mongering, especially, as I said about movies earlier, especially when they make people fear the software more than they should, or when they make people think that the software can, I don't know everything about you, what you had for breakfast and what your grandmother's shoe size is, just in a second by scanning your face. Yes, these are all instances of irresponsibility on behalf of the media, in my opinion.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks. I arrived a little later than I planned to, so I don't know if you already talked about this, but well, for my little research on facial recognition stuff and I studied it. I know about that failure acceptance rate. So did you talk about it yet? Like, how do the all countries, because you had pros and cons for all of them, how do they cope with the fact that they can mislabel some people and confuse them with criminals?
Yeah, I don't know if you caught the talk in that part where I took the main countries which implemented this software at a public level, and basically there's only backlash in the US and the UK, and I don't know, there was an attempt to implement this in Germany and huge backlash, so they stopped. And so on. And one of the principal points of backlash in these countries is, yes, also the gender and racial bias, which is built into the software because of the data it is currently based on.
Okay, so no matter the input they fed, it's not going to be 100% for sure, and they cope with the fact that a she at some point might pass as a he.
Yeah, theoretically it should get better.
Yep.
As it is being fed more diverse data.
Nice.
And as for the other countries, there doesn't seem to be any significant backlash over misidentification or any significant backlash over anything, like the Asian and Middle Eastern places where it was implemented. They seem to be okay with it, so I guess it's not a problem. Perhaps also the data which was being fed into the software was more homogeneous. Probably, I would assume.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, and I have a funny one a bit.
Okay.
Did you use multiple facial recognition software applications, I suppose? Because they're free on the market, some of them, and are quite useful at some point.
I personally never used one.
So you're
with
the
my
answer is gonna
face.
be no.
I am, yes,
no,
I'm
not
one
with
of
your
those
face.
people. I'm
No,
sorry.
not with your, exactly, that was my question. Like, did you try to use multiple softwares against Carla's dreams pictures?
That's an interesting point.
I mean,
No, I
you
did
said
not.
something about makeup, so that guy's makeup
Yeah,
is...
that heavy, unusual makeup confuses the software. True.
Yep.
I should. Okay.
Are there any more questions?
Yeah, well, even the Facebook Messenger app has a bit of a facial recognition system when you take photos with it and you want to try all those cool effects. Again, a citizen positive application. Like they will ask you to open your mouth so they can detect where your face is before the whole dragon headdress is loaded. Yeah. Yeah.
Are there any more questions for Miriam? Not like comments and funny quips? Because those are the ones standing between you and pizza right now. Just saying.
True, but at the same time, we know that nothing is unhackable and there are lots of data breaches, and the potential of having so much private data gathered into one huge database on all the population can be cause for concern.